Hello, I'm Amanda Burrell, and welcome to Planet SOS, a new weekly show on Al Jazeera. Our planet is in crisis. All over the world, people are affected by what has become a global emergency, and the natural world is in decline. 1 million species, more than 12% of all known life on Earth, are on the brink of extinction. But there is time, and there is hope. New science, new technology, people around the world already taking action. One person may not make much difference, but billions together, now that creates worldwide change. The crisis affecting our planet is unprecedented in its scale. Each one of us is affected in some way, and for many, it's already an emergency. Our actions are behind it, but our actions can also change it. Around the world, scientists, activists, politicians, business and community leaders, everyday people are taking action, working out how to adapt as global temperatures rise, how to prepare as weather patterns shift, how to prevent ice sheets melting, sea levels rising, and the collapse of the Earth's natural support systems on which life depends. That's why Al Jazeera is boosting its coverage of this truly global issue. Every week on Planet SOS, we'll set out the facts and the science. We'll celebrate our collective determination to find solutions, and we'll discuss the issues at stake. I'll be with you throughout, as will our environment correspondent Nick Clark, who's covered this story extensively for Al Jazeera and knows it inside out. He's been travelling the world to tell your stories for Planet SOS. We'll be joined by Al Jazeera's correspondents from around the globe. From island nations threatened by rising sea levels, to energy innovations in Thailand, and threats to the rainforests of Borneo as a warming planet forces Indonesia to move its capital city. We'll report on land regeneration in Africa, water challenges and solutions in the Middle East, and broadcast from the melting glaciers of Iceland. And as the Amazon forest burn and the extreme weather destroys lives and livelihoods, we'll tell your stories of resilience and determination. We begin in French Guiana, a region of rich biodiversity. It's already under pressure from development and now illegal gold mining. Here's Nick Clark with our exclusive report.
French Guiana has what is a rare wealth in this day and age, a natural wealth, and you have to take to the air to get a measure of it. This is one of the most forested territories on Earth, the outer reaches of Amazonia. There are few roads into the interior. You travel by helicopter or by water. But that hasn't stopped people getting in search of wealth of another kind. The thing is, beneath these trees there lies gold, lots of it, and the price of gold is high. And that brings in the garimperos, the illegal gold miners. We're in the air for just 10 minutes when we chance upon this, a great scar in the green, an illicit gold mining operation. Down below, the miners see us and scatter. There's a futile attempt to hide equipment. Here, someone throwing a water pump into a mining pool. Trees have been ripped out, and mercury used in the mining process will have leached into the soil and waterways. Most of the miners cross illegally from Brazil.
It's a problem of destruction of trees, animals and rivers.
We fly on and see evidence of more activity. There are around 400 illegal mine sites in French Guiana, extracting an estimated 10 tons of gold annually, worth nearly $500 million. On the ground at a scientific research station, we meet the head of this French territory.
We have 600 soldiers, paramilitary police and other services engaged daily in the fight against illegal gold mining. 200 of these, mostly soldiers, police, forestry and customs agents, sleep nightly in the forest.
It's only when you enter the rainforest and you see and hear all its tremendous biodiversity that you really begin to appreciate just what's at stake here. The tropics contains half the world's biomass, and rainforests a significant proportion of that.
There is plenty of science going on. For one thing, researchers helping to build knowledge in the fight against climate change.
We are in a world where carbon and nitrogen are increasing. We would like now to better understand what the forest, how the forest will react to this change.
French Guiana's rainforest remains an invaluable resource, a rare, mostly intact part of Amazonia. Keeping it that way is the challenge. Nick Clark in French Guiana for Planet SOS.
For some people, a warming planet isn't a possibility, it's already a reality. More than 2.5 million people in Somalia have been forced from their homes by the ravages of a changing climate. Al Jazeera's Mohammed Ado has our report from Baidoa.
Dry, dusty and parched, desert sand is slowly taking over once fertile fields in Somalia. Just 2 years after the last drought ended, the country is again facing one of the driest rainy seasons in more than 3 decades. The victims are visible almost everywhere. Makeshift camps like this one for those affected by drought can be found in almost every city. This is Baidoa in southwest Somalia. These people have just arrived from the countryside. Hareda Edin builds a hut for her family from old clothes. She says it took them a month to get here.
Our cattle died first, and then the crops failed. We fled hunger, but it still follows us. We have had no help since we arrived here.
The people of Somalia have always named droughts and used them as historical milestones, but that was when droughts were 10 or 15 years apart. Now they've become the new norm, and scientists say that the country has dried up much faster in the 20th century than at any other time in the past 2,000 years. These barren plains of sand and stone have always known long dry spells, but they've always been followed by rain. Enough at least to rebuild huts so debts can be repaid and milk provided for the children. That's changed. 91-year-old Aliou Nouro Aliou says he has never seen shifting weather patterns this unforgiving.
I don't remember our granaries not having food until recently. These droughts are quite different from what we used to see. There is no time for recovery. They just keep coming back.
Just a few months ago, Bishara Abdurrahman had 25 goats. Now she has just 5. The rest withered and died in the current drought.
I survive on donations from well-wishers. There's no pasture for the goats, and I'm forced to look for grass for them in farms. And at times, I even have to share my food with them.
Nomadic animal herding is not just an economic activity for the people of Somalia. It is who they are. And as the climate changes, they too are being forced to change. Mohammed Ado in Baidoa, Somalia, for Planet SOS.
So a heartbreaking report from a place where the climate crisis is already so real. Well, one of the world's most powerful men, the head of the United Nations, has put the climate emergency at the top of his agenda. Antonio Guterres sat down with Al Jazeera's diplomatic editor, James Bays, ahead of the UN Climate Summit.
You have convened a climate summit. You said to those world leaders, don't come with a speech, come with a plan. What do you want to hear?
No, it's very simple. We are losing the race. Climate change is running faster than what we are. Things are getting worse by the day. The rising waters in the oceans, the increase of temperatures, the multiplication of natural disasters, the dramatic impacts of drought in different parts of the world, all this is creating a situation that is a real threat to humankind, and we are not doing enough.
There is a criticism of you, and it was made of your predecessor as well, which is that you are not prepared to stand up to the 5 permanent members of the Security Council. On this issue, which you say is so crucial, are you prepared to confront them even if it costs you a second term as Secretary General?
I don't care about a second term. With the United States or China, with Russia or whoever, I've been telling all of them that they need to do everything in order to make sure that we reach carbon neutrality in 2050 and that temperatures will not grow above 1.5 degrees at the end of the century.
Obviously, there are scientists with different views on this, but from what you're being told...
Scientists might have different views, but nature is angry, and I've seen it in the Bahamas.
But
when you have more than 200 miles per hour winds that stay in an island for 2 days, destroying everything, Mother Nature is angry.
And
Scientists can say whatever they want, but the majority, overwhelming majority of scientists recognize why Mother Nature is angry. And Mother Nature is angry because we are making it angry with what we are doing, pushing for climate change. Today, public opinions are more ready to accept the need to change than politicians themselves, and that it is very important that public opinions push their governments, push their political systems to take the right decisions.
What are you being told by the scientists? How long do we have to save the planet?
We don't have much time. We have probably 12 years, 11, 12 years to change course. If not, it will be irreversible that we will not be able to contain the increase of temperatures at 1.5 degrees at the end of the century. What is clear for me is that we absolutely need to reconcile humankind with nature. If you look at history, history is full of examples of people fighting each other. I think for the first time, people are fighting the creation. People are fighting Mother Nature. So we need to recognize this and we need to change course.
You're a family man, Secretary General. When you think of your children, your grandchildren and their future, does this issue, the climate crisis, does it keep you up at night?
It's central in my life. I have 3 granddaughters. I have no idea how the world will be when they will have my age. When they will be 70, the world will be completely different. But one thing is clear. My generation has the obligation to allow them to live in a healthy planet. And we are not fulfilling that obligation. We are destroying the planet in which they will have to live.
A powerful message there from the UN Secretary-General. And next week on Planet SOS, we'll bring you how politicians and the people they represent responded to his call. Now, talking about the climate crisis can be difficult, not just for world leaders, but for many of us too. But there is power in information, and not just from us. Al Jazeera has joined more than 250 media organisations in a global initiative called Covering Climate Now. It's aimed at strengthening reporting of the climate emergency, and we'll be sharing content from our partners throughout Planet SOS. And directing you to initiatives like this one from the International Red Cross. It's a new social media campaign called Faces of Climate Change, with plenty of suggestions on what people can do to end the crisis. They're the largest climate protests in history. Millions of people in more than 150 countries joined what was truly a global climate strike. The rallies on Friday began in the Pacific and Asia, inspired by youth, but joined by people of all ages, demanding an end to the climate crisis. From Kenya to South Africa, Mali to Madagascar, young people led marches across the African continent and in the Middle East. Large parts of Europe were brought to a standstill, including the City of London, already the focus of months of climate strikes. People marched in the Americas, Brazil, Bolivia, Mexico City, and the United States, culminating in a mass rally in New York, led by the schoolgirl who inspired the global climate strike, 16-year-old Greta Thunberg. Greta became a global icon after an impassioned speech at the UN Climate Conference in Poland last year. Since then, she's emboldened millions of students to hold protests every Friday. One of those she's inspired is climate activist Vanessa Nakate from Kampala in Uganda. The 22-year-old is in New York for the UN's Youth Climate Summit.
I'm going to take the love and passion that these youths have for the climate issues in their countries and take it back home to our country to teach and let other youth know that it is our responsibility to fight and demand for what's rightfully ours.
Now, Al Jazeera visited Vanessa just before she left home. Here's her story.
After school, I wanted to do something that could cause change and impact in people's lives in my country. Through my research, I got to find out about climate strikes by Greta Thunberg. I started looking for climate activists around Africa, but I failed to get one. I started to look for them in Uganda, but I failed to get one. So it was up to me to start the climate strikes. I'm fighting for a better future for everyone, a better future for my family, for the citizens of this country, for Africa as a continent, and for the citizens of this entire world. I believe that through my strikes, climate action can be taken by our government leaders and the public to try and mitigate the situation and reverse the problem that we are facing right now. As invited by United Nations for the Youth Climate Summit, so I've been carrying out preparations. I'm going to represent my country and Africa as a continent. Climate change is real and it is dangerous for us all. It knows no age and it knows no person. If it is to destroy a life, it destroys anyone. So they should join the fight against the climate crisis.
Well, Greta Thunberg wasn't the first young woman to take her fight to the global stage. In 1992, Seven Cullis Suzuki spoke at the UN Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro at just 12 years old. Let's listen to both their calls for drastic action.
My dad always says, you are what you do, not what you say. Well, what you do makes me cry at night. You grown-ups say you love us, but I challenge you, please, make your actions reflect your words. Thank you.
You say you love your children above all else, and yet you're stealing their future in front of their very eyes. Until you start focusing on what needs to be done, rather than what is politically possible, there is no hope.
Well, Seven has gone on to become a prominent environmentalist, and she joins us now from Gothenburg in Sweden. Seven, hello, very good to have you on the show. So very similar messages from children calling on the adults to take the action necessary to protect their future. And yet 27 years in between, how many times is this message going to have to be repeated?
Well, to be honest, we don't have another generation to wait. This time, climate change is here. Climate change is happening. We are well into the 6th mass extinction event. And now the voices of youth, voices of future generation are calling for intergenerational justice. And we've run out of time. This is it. And it's incredible that the young people around the world are rising up and demanding the adult generations to prove that they love their children.
So you sound optimistic, hopeful that the mobilization today can really make a difference. Is that how you feel?
I'm a mother. I have 2 little children. I have cast my lot with the future. And I have to believe that we have a chance. And of course we have a chance. Human beings are incredibly innovative. I'm especially emboldened when I think about past mobilizations. I think we can see that there is a real hope and real progress and real possibility. So yes, I am hopeful because I have to be.
What do you think the best way forward is to ensure that the impetus continues to move forward and doesn't get pushed back again like in the early 1990s?
We need our politicians, our leaders to implement different policies to level the playing field so we actually, as a society, can revolutionize and transform. We have to get off fossil fuels. This is a huge change in our way of human life. And so we need infrastructure to shift.
We need infrastructure and we also need inspiration. What do you think it is about these 2 young girls, you and Greta, which really made people sit up and prick up their ears?
It's really amazing to me that people are still talking about a speech that a 12-year-old gave at the UN 27 years ago. People really respond to the voice of our children. There's something about the clarity, the voice, the moral authority of children and youth that can cut through all of the rationalizations that we make for the destruction of the world.
Well, let's hope that the adults continue to listen. Thank you so much, Seven. It's been great to have you on the show.
Thank you very much, Amanda.
Well, some action has not been without consequence. One of the memorable images from global warming protests in London in April was of protester Phil Kingston eating his lunch on top of a train on his 83rd birthday. We'd hoped to have him here on Planet SOS, but he and other Extinction Rebellion protesters are now awaiting trial for public order offences. Our planet is heating up largely because of all the carbon dioxide we're putting into the atmosphere. So what if we could take it out? It's a radical solution that's been around for decades, but the technology isn't quite there yet. We're talking carbon capture and storage, or CCS. Here's Al Jazeera's Mirjana Hond with a look at whether this really can save our planet.
A number of companies around the world are at the cutting edge of carbon capture and storage technology, or CCS, using machines to suck in and then absorb CO2 from the air, using a range of chemical reactions. Different technologies, but the same objective, to pull a tonne of carbon from the air for much less than $100 and lock it back in the earth where it came from. Scientists say if we are to make a real dent in the carbon pollution shrouding our planet, then carbon capture and storage technology needs to be deployed on a massive and global scale. Problem is, it uses a lot of energy and it's uneconomic. There's just no money to be made in it. Sure, burying the CO2 back into the ground is good for the planet and for us, but there's little incentive for companies, including the carbon polluters, to develop CCS technology and iron out the kinks. And for the entrepreneurs who are trying, well, they're left hunting for cash to cover their costs. One possibility is for governments to subsidise the process through tax incentives or to agree on a global price on carbon pollution. Thing is, to build a carbon capture industry to the scale needed, the price on carbon has to be high. And many governments are wary of the backlash from voters if it affects the cost of everyday goods. Which leads us to another possibility. What if, rather than storing all that waste carbon underground, we used some of it to create things of value, things that might even be profitable? Well, scientists and entrepreneurs have been experimenting with just that, how to convert carbon pollution into products like jet fuel, concrete, even food. And as renewable energy gets cheaper, using clean energy sources to ensure the different processes are gentle on the planet. Scientists agree carbon recycling can't replace carbon capture and storage. There's simply too much CO2 out there. But the benefit of carbon recycling lies in the market it creates for all that captured carbon, a market that turns waste CO2 into something profitable, a launching pad for it to be deployed on a global scale, what the world's leading scientists say is needed to keep our planet cool.
So a shift in the way we think about carbon, from waste that pollutes the atmosphere to a resource that can be recycled. For more, Mariana joins me in the studio. Mariana, so it sounds that carbon recycling is the way that we're going to be able to take this technology forward.
Exactly. Carbon recycling alone won't fix the problem of carbon pollution. A number of the recycled carbon products, like jet fuel, will simply put the carbon back into the atmosphere. So the real appeal is in developing the market for that waste CO2, turning it into something useful and incentivising industry to be able to double down on developing the technology to the point it needs to be, to reduce the amount of energy needed to convert it to enough of a yield, enough CO2 to make it cost effective, and then deploy it on a large global scale to be able to deal with the huge amount, hundreds of gigatons of CO2 in the atmosphere.
And yet you do hear, despite the uncertainty at the moment, you do hear a lot of people talking about it as the solution to runaway emissions.
And it's not even close. There are politicians with their own agendas. There are some in the fossil fuels industry who are trying to paint carbon capture and storage technology as the answer, as a way of cleaning up dirty energy. And there are power plants, factories which are capturing emissions, but they're a tiny fraction of those that are pumping out CO2, and it's nothing like what is needed.
So what is needed? How much carbon are we going to have to capture?
Let's take a look at this graph here. You can see it's from NASA, and it gives you an idea of CO2 emissions over time. And you can see under the line the gentle rise and fall of CO2 right up until 1950, and then it rises to where we are currently, sitting at around 410. If we stay here, we're in trouble. That's catastrophic. Scientists say where we need to be is back down on that 350 mark. Now, to get there, the UN's body on climate change, the IPCC, says we need to look at more innovative, potentially radical solutions. One of them is carbon capture and storage technology. It has promise. It's technology that needs to be developed, along with many others.
So there's a lot of progress that needs to be made very quickly. Thank you very much, Mariana. For a deeper dive into potential new technologies, take a look at Climate Hackers. That's a programme from Al Jazeera's People and Power series, and you'll find it in the documentaries section at aljazeera.com. Well, that's what we've done, but we also really want to hear from you. You can get in touch with us on Twitter using hashtag AJPlanetSOS. There's a lot of climate data out there and it can be overwhelming. But some data trends are simply more important than others. And so we've created a data tracker setting out some of the big numbers, and we'll bring them to you every week. What's going up, but which will hopefully one day start coming down. Next week, we'll have the UN's highly anticipated report on the health of our planet's ice and oceans, and we'll take a look at what's needed to preserve these vital resources. Well, that's it for Planet SOS this week. From me, Amanda Burrell, and the whole team, goodbye for now.